بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا ونبينا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين لا سيما بقية الله في الأرضين جل الله تعالى فرجه الشريف اللهم أخرجني من ظلمات الوهم وأكرمني بنور الفهم اللهم افتح علينا أبواب رحمتك وانشر علينا خزائن علومك برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. Alhamdulillah, we have tawfiq to continue our studies at Hujjat Academy, and this is the 7th term that Alhamdulillah we have tawfiq to study. As you know, inshallah, we are going to have two subjects. One is Introduction to the Science of Kalam, and the other is Introduction to the Science of Fiqh, based on a very respected and well-known book, which is Understanding Islamic Sciences by Ayatollah Mutahhari. Of course, the book is originally in Farsi. It is called Ashnai ba Ulum Islami, Introduction to Islamic Sciences. If you want to know the history of the book, of course, you have it in the introduction. Ayatollah Mutahhari used to be in Qom for most of his studies. He was in Qom. But at a certain time, he went to Tehran and settled in Tehran. Although he later used to also go frequently to Qom and teach in Qom also maybe 2 days a week. But he was for the most part lecturer in the faculty of Ilahiyat, Danishkade Ilahiyat in Tehran University. And he was, of course, giving also lectures outside. He had different types of sessions and circles. Just a few days ago, I was reading somewhere that Ayatollah Subhani, who is one of our Maraja, says that he had a conversation with Ayatollah Mutahhari about how much he works. And Ayatollah Mutahhari said, I work up to the edge of death. Means I really exhaust myself in studying. And he also is quoted as saying that this was before revolution. Ayatollah Mufatteh says he told that after the revolution, my preference would be I just sit in my library and continue my studying and research and writing and defending Islam in that way. So he was very much dedicated to study from very early age. One of the barakat and blessings of his presence in Tehran was that he was teaching in university, and he used to teach different subjects for different levels. He used to have this course for students in the faculty of theology or Ilahiyat, and then during his life these were used in other places, especially, for example, the section on philosophy was used in Sharif University and in other places. He had the intention of revising and expanding perhaps, but he was unfortunately not given chance, and he was killed, as you know, was martyred shortly after the revolution. So this is the book that now It's very much used in Hose, in universities, and whoever wants to have introduction to these sciences so that they can later build upon it, they use this book. Alhamdulillah, the translation is also available in English. So what we are going, inshallah, to study in this term is two major parts of this book. One is about Kalam, one is about fiqh. So maybe we can start with the one about Kalam. The science of Kalam is something which you may translate it as theology, but it's not exactly theology, because those who are familiar with theology, they know that the way it is understood in the West is mostly based on Christian understanding of theology. And theology in Christianity is not just aqaid, it's not just doctrines. Theology covers almost everything. Even ethics is part of theology. But in Islamic tradition, when we say kalam, it's more about knowing your aqaid, your doctrines, your beliefs, the creed. Sometimes they used to call this ilm al-tawheed. Sometimes they used to call it ilm al-usul or usul al-din. So there are different names for this. We will talk about the reason this name Kalam was selected and became very popular. Inshallah, we'll talk about it. But to begin with, in order to have an idea about what is this science about, we can say that in a very traditional and well-established classification, Islamic teachings are put into three categories. This is very famous, and this is inspired by a hadith from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. As you know, once Rasulullah saw some Muslims very much impressed and amazed by presence of a person who knew genealogy of Arabs. He had knowledge of Ansab. So he was very much familiar with who is father, grandfather, grand-grandfather of people. And people were very happy with that, and they were asking questions, about this. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Innamal ilmu thalatha." Sometimes you are talking about information, so anything can be information. But if you are talking about knowledge, and we mean here by knowledge something that can make you a better person, a better servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, something that can help you in your journey towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's one of the three. Ayatun muhkama, either it is a firm communication, firm sign, which is interpreted as aqaid, or sunnatun qa'ima, or something about recommended ways of behaving, recommended ways of acting and living, which is interpreted as akhlaq, as ethics, or faridatun adilah, or just obligations, means just rulings, which is about fiqh. And anything other than the three is fadl, is a merit. It's good to know other sciences, other disciplines. Even sometimes maybe practically they become necessary as we will inshallah study in the introduction to fiqh, that sometimes as a matter of wajib kifai, we need to learn other subjects. But these three are something that everyone in all circumstances need and can benefit from. So based on this, normally they say that we have three major branches of Islamic studies. One is about our aqidah, one is about our akhlaq, the other is about our ahkam, rulings of fiqh, of sharia. There can be other sciences at the service of these three. For example, we study sarf, nahv, balagha, Arabic morphology, Arabic syntax, Arabic rhetorics. We study logic, we study usul al-fiqh. We have lots of other sciences, but they are instrumental. They are mostly to serve as instruments for learning these three areas of Islam. Also, we have sciences developed about Muslims and Muslim world. Nowadays, in universities, especially in Western academia, when they talk about Islamic studies, sometimes all or at least most of it is about a study of Muslims and a study of Muslim world instead of a study of Islam. But for us, the main thing is a study of Islam, and of course, a study of Muslims is good, but it cannot replace a study of Islam. Like, for example, we can study fiqh. We can just study the history of fiqh, different schools of fiqh, different figures, different books. These are not fiqh itself. These are about fiqh. So, if we want to study Islam itself, the teachings of Islam, we can say there are three major areas. Aqaid, something that you have to know and believe. Akhlaq, something that you have to know and build in yourself. And fiqh, something that you have to practice. You have to know and practice. In order to have these three, you need to understand the Quran and Hadith. You need to have other skills. But finally, they will lead to these three areas. When it comes to aqaid, the science which is responsible is ilmul kalam. The science of kalam is responsible for a study of aqaid. And the person who is expert in this science is called mutakallim. Although mutakallim literally means a speaker. Yes? Because kalam means a speech. And mutakallim means a speaker. But here we have a special terminology. We say kalam, the science of kalam, which is the science of aqaid, the science of Islamic theology. And mutakallim is the one who is expert in this science. I will tell later why this name was picked up. But we also get some help from Islamic philosophy for aqaid. Because Islamic philosophy, although by definition is just interested in using intellectual methods to discover the truth, and philosophy as such is not responsible to prove anything. It's not responsible for proving anything. Philosophy is to discover the truth through intellectual reasoning. But we know that because Islamic ideas are compatible with reason, therefore, if you do proper philosophy, you can also establish many principles and doctrines of faith. If you look at any book on Islamic philosophy, for example, even textbooks like Bidayatul Hikmah, Nihayatul Hikmah, Manzuma by Haji Sabzawari, Isharat wa Tanbihat by Khaja, of course the commentaries by Khaja, the text is by Ibn Sina. Any book you see, they have great also attention to existence of God, knowing attributes of God, and so on and so forth. So Islamic philosophy helps a lot when it comes to understanding aqa'id. But the science which was developed and it's wholly dedicated to aqa'id is the science of Kalam. The science of Kalam. When did the science of Kalam start? We know that everything about development of sciences in Islam was natural. It's not that, for example, there was an instruction given by an authority that we want to start this science. It was a matter of natural needs and curiosity for understanding. Needs and curiosity for understanding in a culture which is promoting knowledge and teaching and learning led to development of these sciences. So, Ayatollah Mutahhari says, although some people may try to find origins of Kalam or Irfan in other cultures and say Muslims were influenced by them or inspired by them, he says actually it is the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet that encouraged Muslims to think about aqa'id. The way the Quran talks about aqa'id is not believe and don't ask. Believe and don't think about it. This is not the way Quran teaches. This is not the way Rasulullah and Ahlul Bayt used to teach people. The Quran in tens of verses asks people to think, to reflect, to ponder, encourages us to ask questions, even says you must ask questions. فَاسْأَلُوا أَحْلَ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنْتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. So Muslims realized that not only it's not bad, indeed it's necessary to ask serious questions about their faith. So there was a culture which encouraged asking and discussing, and also there was a natural need because over decades questions were coming and they needed to answer. In the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to find the answer was very easy because first of all Muslim world was small and Rasulullah was the one that he had complete authority. After the demise of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there were new issues or there were existing issues that needed more explanation. Rasulullah, as someone who is accepted by all Muslims, was not there. Muslim world was expanded. They came across other cultures, other religions. So there were so many questions that there was no one who was agreed by everyone to give the answer. So they started discussing and debating, sometimes peaceful debates, and sometimes it was very hot and sometimes forceful debates. Sometimes in the time of Abbasid caliphs, even based on whoever has power was getting into the theological discussions. For example, there was a very hot debate about whether the Quran is hadith or qadim, is eternal or created. And sometimes people were put in prison, or maybe they lost their life because they didn't believe in the way that the caliph and the establishment believed. But there were ups and downs. So sometimes, for example, Mu'tazilites were favored, sometimes Ash'arites were favored, then there was a turn. So, lack of a single, universally agreed authority after the demise of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Emergence of new questions or opening of existing questions to new dimensions, and being in touch with other cultures created a culture of discussion and debating about Islamic aqaid. Therefore, little by little, there were circles of people who came together and they discussed, and they were distinct from other circles. So affiliations, associations started. Ayatollah Mutahhari says maybe the first circle of studying Kalam was formed by Hassan al-Basri, who died in 110 after Hijrah. So in the second half of the first century, we have already serious discussions and circles of studying Kalam. And then in the second century, this became even more. One of the very early topics was the issue of Jabr and Ikhtiyar. Jabr means predestination. Something is predestined, something is already decided. Some people translate as determinism. So determinism means we are not really in control of our actions. We may think that we are in charge of our actions, but we are not indeed in charge of our actions. Everything is created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we are influenced by external or internal factors, and we don't have any control. In contrast, there were Qadariyun. These were Jabriyun. There were also Qadariyun who believed that when it comes to our actions, we have full control. And God has nothing to do with our voluntary actions. Everything is left to us. God has something to do with the rest of the world, but not with our voluntary actions. For example, God has something to do with my life, with my death, growth of my hair or whatever, but not about my voluntary actions, because they were not able to understand how you can be free and at the same time God can be in charge. So either they highlighted Tawheed with respect to actions, but they compromised about free will, or they highlighted free will and they compromised about Tawheed with respect to action. But the Shia had another view, which was a position, a status between the two. أمر بين أمرين, as Imam Sadiq alayhi salam said, لا جبر ولا تفويض بل أمر بين أمرين. Neither determinism nor delegation of all the authority to human beings. There is something in between. There is an area that you can exercise your free will, but still you don't go out of Allah's control, out of Allah's power. You are responsible. No one dictates to you what to do, but at the same time, it's not that you are the only factor. In any case, inshallah, we'll talk about this, but this was one of the early topics that led to the emergence of a distinct discipline like Kalam. There was also issue of husn qubh. This led to another question about what makes something good or bad. We mean morally good or bad. What makes something right or wrong? Is there any objective criteria for morally good or morally bad actions? The issue of divine justice was raised. Later, as I said, the issue of whether Quran is created or it is eternal. So different issues. The issue of successorship to the Prophet. This was also a very important issue, which was raised after the demise of the Prophet. So these questions motivated some Muslims to study this, and little by little it became more technical, and some people had to specialize, some books had to be written, some circles had to be formed, so it became by itself a discipline. Why this is called Kalam? Kalam means a speech. Kalima means word. And Kalam means a speech. Some people say it is called Kalam because it was the habit of the theologians that when they wanted to mention their idea, they used to say, Al-Kalamu fi kada, or Kalamuna fi kada, means our opinion about something. But instead of saying opinion, they used to say our speech, our word, what we say about this, what we say about that subject. So the word Kalam was very much used in order to refer to their opinion, what you say about this. Some people say the reason it was called Kalam is because the issue of Kalam of God, divine speech, was a very important issue. And therefore, this major issue of Kalamullah, is divine speech, divine word, is created or not, is it nafsi or not? There were many issues about Kalam of God. This was a major issue. They said the science is given the name, is named after one of its major topics. Some people say the reason it was called Kalam is that because there were different groups of people. Some were encouraging to speak about these issues. Some people used to say it's necessary to be silent. It's haram to speak about these issues. Some of Ahlul Hadith, the people of Hadith. The people of Hadith are different from Muhaddithin. Don't please make mistake. Muhaddith means the one who is a scholar of Hadith, someone who is expert in the field of Hadith. But Ahlul Hadith is a special name for a group of Muslims who were mostly relying on Hadith and denying the need for any reasoning outside the realm of Hadith. Even you don't need to go into deep discussions about hadith. Just take the hadith, make sure it is reliable, and act upon it or believe in it. Some of them very much were against actually the science of Kalam. So we don't need anything else. We don't need to discuss these issues. You know the famous case that when one of them was asked, what is the meaning of Ar-Rahmanu ala al-Arsh istawa? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is dominant over throne, his Arsh. So he said, Al-Istiwa'u ma'lumun. We know the meaning of istawa. That's what we know in Arabic language is enough. Istawa means to be standing on something, to be dominant. Wal kayfu majhulun. But the quality of this istawa, when Allah is dominant on Arsh, we don't know the quality. Was-su'alu bid'ah. And if you ask, what does it mean? This is bid'ah. It's a heresy. Because this was not asked in the time of the Prophet. So in this way, they were stopping people to go into serious discussions about aqaid. So they were against logic, they were against kalam, let alone philosophy. This is Ahlul Hadith. Of course, today we have also Ahlul Hadith. Maybe they don't believe the same way. So if you hear today Ahlul Hadith, maybe they have variations. So you cannot say they say the same thing. But this is the way Ahlul Hadith were shaped and formed as a group of people who were against using reasoning and logic in understanding Islam. They were more based on the text and just try to understand the text. Don't ask anything deeper than that. So, some people say the reason for this science to be called Kalam is because some people banned talking about these issues. And Mutakallimin were the people who were talking about these issues. So they wanted to say it's good to talk about these issues. And we talk about these issues and we discuss these issues. Another thing that we need to discuss is about two major branches of Kalam. We have what we call Al-Kalamul Aqli and what we call Al-Kalamul Naqli. Kalam sometimes uses rational, intellectual arguments. Sometimes uses a scripture, the Quran and Hadith. For some issues, we use intellectual approach. For some issues, we use what we call transmitted knowledge, naqli. Naql means transmit, means something like the Quran, like Hadith, which has been transmitted to us. Maybe for some issues we can use both. I give you an example. For example, if you want to prove to someone that Islam is a true religion, or the Quran is word of God, or God exists, you use intellectual arguments. You cannot bring a hadith and say because of this hadith God exists, or because of this hadith Islam is true religion. You need to bring rational arguments. Otherwise people would say you are begging the question. We say musadaratul matlub, means you are avoiding to prove and just are bringing something which already depends on your claim. I have to first establish that Rasulullah has authority, then I can quote him to prove. Therefore, part of Kalam uses arguments that you can convince people who don't have faith. Maybe they don't have faith in God, or maybe they have faith in God but not faith in Islam. So you use intellectual argument. But for some issues, you can use arguments from Quran and Hadith because you have already established the truth and the validity of the Quran and Hadith. For example, many issues about Ma'ad, about resurrection, the only way to understand them is through Quran and Hadith. Ma'ad itself, the need for resurrection, the need for having complete justice, can be understood through reason and through Quran and Hadith. But many details of Ma'ad have to be learned from Quran and Hadith, because there is no way to understand these things with your aql, because aql has a limit in what can understand. Like, for example, you cannot understand the taste of ice cream with aql. Yeah? You cannot understand the fragrance of rose with aql. It's not that aql contradicts. Aql is just silent about these particular things. I cannot use my aql and say what is the population of certain countries. In medieval ages, there is a funny thing that they used to use intellectual arguments to say how many teeth are in the mouth of the horse. But we laugh at it because it doesn't make sense. Muslim logicians, they say you cannot use burhan in juz'iyat, in particular things. You cannot bring intellectual argument. Particular things have to be understood through perception, ihsas, or through revelation. In any case, details of Ma'ad we need to learn from Quran and Hadith. Or, for example, we can understand from Aql as well as Quran and Hadith that there must be successor to the Prophet. But then, who is now the successor to the Prophet? We cannot use philosophical argument to identify a person. To identify a person, we need designation, for example, or we need to know about that person's karamat, for example. You cannot just use mind. Therefore, you can say there are three types of issues in Kalam. Issues that can only be understood by aql, issues that can be understood by naql, means Quran and Hadith, and issues that you can use both aql and naql. That part of Kalam which uses intellectual, rational, aqli arguments is called Kalam Aqli. Kalam Aqli. In Christianity, they call it natural theology. Natural theology means it is just based on reason. That part of Kalam which is relying on Quran and Hadith, it is called Kalam al-Naqli or Kalam al-Masmu', something which is heard, which is based on the scripture, on the Quran and Hadith. So Kalam has two sides. And the last point for today, if we want to mention the functions of Kalam, the aims for studying Kalam, we can say there are three aims. One to prove the truth of religion, in this case Islam, the truth of your mazhab, denomination, the truth of your doctrines. How to argue for them, how to convince someone who doesn't agree. This is one function. The second function of Kalam is to explain. There are concepts that we believe in, because everyone as a Muslim knows that this is self-evident, this Islamic idea, but to explain them. For example, you may know what is, for example, isma to some extent. Everyone knows. But if you want explanation, if you want a detailed, a scholarly explanation, what is isma? What is wahy? What is ma'ad al-jasmani, corporeal resurrection? What is raj'ah? So, to prove is something, to explain is a second thing. So, Kalam proves our aqidah, plus helps us to understand it better, explains. And the third is that Kalam defends against the attacks, against the objections raised by those who don't share our belief. If someone who is atheist and attacks God, or someone attacks Islam, or someone attacks Shia Islam, it is the science of Kalam that helps you to be able to answer. This is why our scholars very much emphasize on learning Kalam. And they say it's a necessary, it's an obligation. Even if you read at the beginning of every Risala, every manual of practical laws, you see Maraja say, when it comes to your aqidah, you have to be able to argue for them. You have to be able to back up your aqidah with reasoning. You cannot say, my father, my teacher, or even my marja said that I have to be a Muslim or a Shia or whatever. Every person, when it comes to aqidah, must be able to defend his or her aqidah. In ahkam, we do taqlid. In aqidah, you must study and have your own argument. You don't need to be expert, but at least enough to be able to find out the truth for yourself and be able to defend if someone questions. Inshallah, we continue the rest of discussion, inshallah, in the next session. Wa akhiru da'wana and alhamdulillah rabbil alamin.